I've never liked meetings, not because I'm disinterested or disengaged or lacking ambition, quite the opposite. In the world of market analytics, I thrived on deep focus, quiet patterns, data that whispered before it screamed. My name is Elias Noor, and for nearly 7 years, I was the engine behind some of the boldest strategic shifts at Cormack and Amp, Dren, a global consulting firm based in Chicago. You wouldn't have seen me at the front of the room pitching ideas with bravado. You'd have found me in the war room at 2 a.m., rerunning projections on an overlooked logistics model that would later save a pharmaceutical client $48 million in shipping delays. My work earned praise, on paper. I received internal awards with names like Insight Architect and Quiet Excellence. My dashboards were circulated among executive circles with silent awe, but when it came time to fill the vacant head of strategy role, I wasn't even called into the room. The position went to Brent Talbot, a man whose greatest talent was interrupting others with a grin and calling it energy. He once publicly said, quote, "Elias is smart, but not a leader. He's too inward." I shrugged it off. Leadership wasn't about who spoke the most. It was about who saw the farthest. I told myself that. I told myself it didn't matter. Until it did. Because that wasn't the last time I'd be overlooked. Nor the worst. Not by a long shot. Brent's appointment was the first real sting. He'd once asked me how to pull multidimensional analysis from our proprietary rec system. 2 weeks later, he stood on stage at the quarterly board meeting presenting his new methodology, my method, with my naming convention scrubbed. He called it Brent's 5-Lens Insight Model. The room applauded. I said nothing. What was there to say? I still got my salary. My report still made an impact. But a rot had set in. Quiet at first, like mold behind a polished wall. I watched my ideas passed off by louder voices, my credit absorbed into management slide decks where my name was never mentioned. The tipping point came not with a bang, but a calendar invite. Performance alignment review, 30 minutes. It was from HR. I knew the format. These were usually quick, procedural. Mine lasted 8 minutes. "Elias," said Miranda, the director of HR. Her voice clipped like she was reading from a memo she didn't write. "Your role is being dissolved as part of structural realignment, effective immediately. You'll receive severance through the standard terms." I blinked. "What role?" I asked, keeping my tone even. "Senior Strategic Data Analyst. Your department's functions are being integrated under strategy leadership. Brent's department." I stared at her, then at the slip she pushed across the table. No offer to relocate. No performance discussion. Just a phrase, redundancy due to overlap. I forced myself to speak. "May I ask who made this decision?" She didn't meet my eyes. "It came from executive leadership. Brent, I gathered my things, no theatrics, no words of protest. But as I walked out with a cardboard box, my mug, my favorite mechanical pencil, a signed copy of The Signal and the Noise, my heart was beating not with rage, but clarity. Brent had won. But not because he was right. Because I had allowed silence to speak for me for too long. That night, I sat in my apartment, the blinds half closed, watching the city light shimmer off Lake Michigan. I opened my laptop and looked through my files. There it was. A folder I'd been adding to quietly for 3 years. Quiet Strength, Leadership for Analysts. It had started as a joke. Notes for a book I never intended to write. Observations on how pattern recognition, reflection, and internal calibration created strategic advantage. I'd written about meetings I stayed quiet in, only to deliver insights the next day that changed the course of projects. I reread a note I had typed on a sleepless night after Brent dismissed my idea in a team call. Let them misinterpret silence as absence. Let them forget who built the foundation. I clicked open another folder. It held 10 polished presentation decks, modules I had prepared for internal mentorship workshops that were shelved indefinitely. Titles like The Listening Advantage, Micro-Momentum, Leading Without Volume, Influence by Insight. No one had ever asked for them. No one had ever seen them. Until now. I didn't know where this path would lead, but I knew I wouldn't let my story end in that HR office. They had shut a door. I was going to build a platform. The first week after I was fired felt like a free fall. Not panic, not despair, just silence. A deeper silence than I was used to. I kept my routines. Morning coffee at 6:30, a walk around the park, inbox 0 by 9 o'clock, even though no one was writing anymore. That discipline grounded me. So did a single idea, growing sharper by the hour. What if I wasn't the only one? What if other professionals, introverts like me, had been passed over, ignored, sidelined because they didn't radiate artificial energy? I began to test the theory. I posted a single sentence on LinkedIn. Does anyone else feel like being too quiet cost them a promotion? No hashtags, no photo, no links. By noon, there were over 70 comments. By the next morning, more than 1,300 likes and over 200 private messages. A product manager in Austin wrote, "My boss told me I wasn't a culture fit after 5 years of exceeding KPIs." A lawyer in Singapore messaged, "They said I lacked, quote, executive presence. I just didn't play office politics." The stories poured in. Consultants, analysts, engineers, even a few surgeons. Every one of them had receipts, performance scores, peer reviews, quantifiable wins. But they'd all been made to feel invisible because they didn't dominate meetings or walk the halls with a performative grin. I wasn't alone. That realization lit a fire. I renamed the old folder on my laptop, Quiet Leaders Academy. I broke my 10 internal presentations into a modular course structure, rewrote them from scratch, reframed passive as deliberate, silent as strategic, introverted as internally calibrated. Each day, I crafted content for one module and drafted notes for a corresponding ebook. By night, I was learning everything I could about online education, platforms, pricing, conversion funnels, audience personas. My analytical training became my secret weapon. I A/B tested headlines, surveyed early followers, mapped behavior flow on prototype landing pages. Still, I had no name recognition, no brand. Just a growing belief that the world was missing something vital, a playbook for leaders who didn't want the spotlight but still wanted to make an impact. I used my severance to hire a freelance designer and voiceover artist to create a 1-minute promo video. I didn't appear in it, no dramatic music, just simple phrases over soft piano. Not every leader shouts. Some lead by seeing patterns others miss. It's time we redefine leadership. I posted the video on LinkedIn with a link to an email sign-up page. I expected a few dozen sign-ups. Over 3,000 people joined in 48 hours. I realized then, this wasn't a course. It was a movement. Quiet professionals didn't want pity. They wanted tools, language, recognition. And above all, proof that their way of operating wasn't inferior. It was understood. I wasn't building a revenge plan. I was building a curriculum of justice. Within a month, I had a business plan. I called in a favor from a former colleague in UX design to help with a website. I hired a developer on Upwork to build the course interface. I studied the best-selling leadership courses and dissected their flaws. Too much fluff, too many buzzwords, too little empathy. I called my first course, Lead Like Yourself. It wasn't flashy, it was precise. Like a well-written SQL query. I priced it affordably, offered a scholarship model for underrepresented professionals, and made every lesson downloadable. The beta launch sold out in 3 days. But even then, I didn't let myself celebrate. Brent's voice still echoed in my mind. Too inward. Let him say that again when he saw what I was building. Let the world see that stillness wasn't weakness. It was strategy. I turned off my phone, opened my recording mic, and hit quote record. My first lesson, The Introvert's Advantage, Leveraging Reflection in High-Stakes Environments. I spoke in my normal voice, measured, controlled, clear. It felt like breathing. And the world was finally listening. I launched the Quiet Leaders Academy to an email list of 3,000 and a modest LinkedIn following. Within a week, over 700 had enrolled in the flagship course Lead Like Yourself. But it wasn't just numbers that told me something seismic was happening. It was the messages. An engineering VP from Oslo said he cried watching the first module. A marketing lead in Bangalore told me she played the listening as influence lesson during her team meeting, and 3 team members opened up for the first time in months. A teacher from Atlanta emailed, "I didn't even know I was a leader until you gave me the words for how I operate." And then I got a message from Thea Mendoza. Thea was a director at a global leadership platform, TEDx Beacon Circle. She'd seen a repost of my lesson clip, the one where I used a chess metaphor to explain introverted decision-making. She wrote, "Your content has raw clarity. I don't hear many voices like yours. Precise, quiet, and deeply resonant. Ever considered doing a TED Talk?" I read the message 5 times before responding. Yes, that one word changed everything. In preparation, I went back into full analyst mode. I watched 200 of the most successful TED Talks, scripts, pacing, visual cadence. I built heat maps of audience engagement and correlated them with vocal variation. I rewrote my 15-minute talk 21 times, not to make it louder, just cleaner, tighter. Every word earned its place. When I stepped onto that red circle, I wore a gray sweater, not a blazer, no slides, just me. I was told I was too quiet to lead, I began. But maybe the problem isn't the volume of my voice, it's the volume of our bias. The room held its breath. I spoke about how stillness isn't absence, how hesitation is sometimes depth. I shared real moments, how I lost a promotion, then my job. But I also spoke of how I'd mentored 37 professionals in 6 months who now led teams more productively than before because they leaned into their quiet. 10 minutes in, I could see it. Heads nodding slowly. Not rapid agreement, just steady, full-body recognition. When I walked off stage, I wasn't sure what would happen next. What happened was velocity. The talk went live 3 weeks later. Within 2 days, it hit 300,000 views. By the end of the week, over 1 million. Requests flooded in. Keynote invitations, podcast interviews, book deals. HR teams from Fortune 500 companies wanted licensing rights for the course. Even the U.S. Department of State inquired about adapting my material for diplomatic training. I expanded the Quiet Leaders Academy, hired a team, small, thoughtful, talented. Former students became instructors. We built a mentorship program. And then came the moment I hadn't expected. I received a message from Cormac and Amp, Dren. Not from HR, not from Brent. From their new CEO. She had taken over after a shareholder push ousted the previous leadership team. She'd watched my TED Talk. She asked if I would be willing to consult with their executive board on, quote, introverted leadership strategies for hybrid teams. It was surreal. The same firm that had deemed my role redundant was now offering me a consulting contract to teach their leadership team the very principles they had once buried in silence. I agreed, not out of vindication, but out of opportunity. I wasn't coming back to the firm. I was walking in as the founder of a global movement. Brent was no longer there. Word was, his team had underperformed. His initiatives had fizzled. The foundation he'd stolen had cracked beneath him. Mine was still standing, stronger than ever. I arrived at Cormac and Amp, Dren's Chicago headquarters, on a cold January morning. Same revolving glass doors, same steel and glass lobby that used to make me feel small. But I wasn't here as an employee anymore. I was here as a partner, and I wasn't carrying a laptop bag full of decks someone else would present. I carried nothing but my calm. A young coordinator, Julia, I think, led me to the executive boardroom on the 31st floor. It was the same room where Brent once pitched my model. Now the board waited to hear my vision. This time I had the microphone. The new CEO, Amira Kavinsky, greeted me with a firm handshake and something I hadn't encountered in that room before. Direct respect. "We've been watching your rise," she said. "We need your insight. Our hybrid teams are underperforming, and your approach, it's different. It works." The irony didn't escape me. I took my seat, faced a dozen senior leaders, and delivered a 2-hour seminar titled Sustainable Influence for Quiet Professionals. I showed them retention data from introvert-led teams, I broke down patterns of silent burnout caused by extrovert normative management. I introduced my visibility versus value matrix, a concept I drafted in my final weeks at the firm, shelved, and now reintroduced under my own name. They listened. They took notes. When I finished, Amira stood. "This," she said, holding my one-pager, "is what we should have built 5 years ago." No one said Brent's name. They didn't have to. Afterward, I took a walk around the office floor where I used to sit. My old desk was gone. A new open-plan layout had replaced the pods. But the sense of unease, the pressure to speak louder, faster, bolder than felt natural, still lingered in the energy of the place. I could sense it in the silence of the analysts who watched me pass by. One of them, a young man, maybe 24, hunched over a Tableau dashboard, glanced up, met my eyes, and whispered, "You're the TED guy, right?" I nodded. He smiled. Later that evening, my inbox held a message from him. "Just watched your course. I've felt invisible here for a year. Your talk made me realize that's not a flaw. It's just unacknowledged value. Thank you." That was the real victory. Not the contracts, not the applause, not even the vindication of being invited back. The victory was that quiet professionals around the world were waking up to the idea that leadership wasn't about domination, it was about design. Not about how loudly you spoke, but about how clearly you saw. In the following months, the Quiet Leaders Academy scaled. We built language translation layers, onboarded mentors in 7 countries, and created cohorts for STEM fields, creative industries, and healthcare. When Forbes called asking for an interview for a feature titled The Rise of the Quiet Executive, I agreed, but only if they included case studies of our alumni. I didn't want to be the face of the movement. I wanted to be the door. Because the world didn't need another loud icon. It needed thousands of quiet revolutions. Brent? He resurfaced briefly, hosting a podcast that lasted 6 episodes before fading. His brand was noise. But noise doesn't last. It echoes, then vanishes. But quiet? Quiet endures. Quiet builds. Quiet rewrites the rules. And this time, it was writing them in bold. It's been 3 years since I was let go. Sometimes I still think about that day. The box in my hands, the fluorescent silence of the HR office, the quiet humiliation I swallowed like cold metal. I remember the disbelief, the ache, the fury. I wouldn't let myself feel out loud. But today, I stand in a different place. The Quiet Leaders Academy has reached over 140,000 professionals across 40 countries. Our alumni have gone on to lead Fortune 500 divisions, government task forces, educational institutions. We have built not just a community, but a redefinition of what it means to lead. And yet, people still ask me the same question. "Elias, what was the turning point?" They expect me to say it was the TED Talk, or the viral post, or the moment the CEO called. But that's not true. The real turning point was much smaller, quieter. It happened the moment I stopped waiting for validation from people who couldn't see me. The moment I understood that being overlooked doesn't mean being unworthy. It means being underestimated. And underestimated is a powerful place to begin. When you're underestimated, no one sees you coming. They don't expect precision. They don't prepare for resolve. They miss the architecture you've been quietly building until it's too late to ignore. I've learned that some of the greatest strengths live in reflection, in patience, in observation. That leaders who pause before they speak often speak truths others never saw. That the quietest in the room may not be unsure. They may be studying every flaw in the system, preparing to solve it from the root. If you've ever been told you're too quiet, not visible enough, lacking presence, this story is for you. You don't need to change who you are. You need to understand what you are: strategic, grounded, clear. You're not a failure. You're the missing piece. To the introvert in the corner, sketching blueprints no one's asked to see, keep building. To the analyst who sees patterns faster than they can speak them, keep watching. To the professional who's tired of raising their hand just to be interrupted, stop raising it. Start writing your own table. That's what I did. They said I was too quiet for leadership. Now I teach leaders how to listen to voices like mine. And for the first time in my life, I don't feel small in any room. Because I finally built a room that fits